Welcome to Precision Animal Training, where we teach big lessons through the lens of getting precise science-based behavior. I'm Kier like your ear, Kirsten, crawl like a baby Kraljevic, animal trainer, behavior nerd, and your host. This is a show about real, lasting change. The science of precision, the power of pursuing perfect timing, the art of truly seeing and shaping behavior. Whether you're working with chickens, dogs, dolphins, parrots, horses, or even ourselves, expect real stories from the field, timeless principles that transfer across species, and practical insights you can apply immediately. Because if you can train a chicken with clarity, kindness, and razor-sharp precision, you can train almost anything. So grab a notebook. This is your personal masterclass in curiosity, mechanics, and true behavioral understanding. Today, I'm thrilled to bring together two absolute giants in the field, Dr. Bob Bailey and the brilliant and legendary Ken Ramirez. In this conversation, we dig into what it really means to be a trainer, building rock-solid mechanical skills, thinking critically in a world full of influencer trends and flashy new acronyms, and why investing in yourself is the real path to mastery. You'll hear how Ken Ramirez stepped into new challenges across zoos, aquariums, and conservation projects, how Dr. Bob Bailey turned himself into a living encyclopedia of training science, and why both men believe the best trainers never stop sharpening their own abilities. Whether you're just getting started or you've been at it for years, this episode is packed with hard-won wisdom, lively debate, and practical takeaways you can put to work right away. Let's jump in. So welcome everybody to Deep Fried Studios. I'm Kirsten Kraljevic, and I'm here with two giants in our industry. I know you've heard the saying, standing on the shoulders of giants. These two, I believe I do stand on their shoulders. One, of course, is Dr. Bob Bailey. How are you today, Bob?
I'm doing fine.
Great. And the other is Ken Ramirez. How are you today, Ken?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for coming, Ken. So when I think about ABE and Bob, I think that ABE was proof of concept, right? It was like they took Skinner's work and they applied the technology to hundreds of species, and they put the mechanical skills in literally thousands of trainers' hands. And then you have Karen Pryor, who I believe was more like the communicator. Of course, she wrote Don't Shoot the Dog, which just changed a generation of dog trainers, and she just popularized clicker training and, shared the science. She was an influencer before influencers were popular. And then I look at you, Ken, and I think of you as boots on the ground, or probably wellies on the ground since you were in the aquarium, huh? What did you wear? The Cajun Reeboks, those boots?
Most of what I wear some kind of boot. Even here in the ranch where I'm mucking through mud and stuff like that, I wear very similar boots.
So I was right, boots on the ground. Because when I look at Ken, I see him, and if you followed Ken's, I'm going to say careers with an S, he's brought this to management in aquariums, zoos, conservation efforts, universities, and then back at an international education organization. That's impressive, Ken. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, is your methodology just to say yes to opportunity?
Well, no, I never say no right away. I always look at an opportunity and ask myself, what can I learn from participating in this? What can I contribute to this? And do I have the bandwidth and the time to really dedicate to this? And so those are the kinds of questions I ask myself when opportunities present themselves. But I'm always interested in diversifying. I'm always interested in new things. So I try not to let something I've never done before intimidate me. I just try to go into it with the idea of, look, this is new for me. If you're still interested in having me help you with this, I'm happy to go in this direction. It's not an area of expertise of mine. And that's often helped a lot. I've ventured into areas that were not a part of my skill set. I mean, other than the behavior and training skill set, but I might have worked in an area or with a specific type of animal that I'd never worked with before. And it was just having confidence in my training knowledge and confidence in the partners that were working with me that they would fill in the gaps in the places where where I had deficits.
So when I look at you and Bob, really, you're that 1% of generalists that can be the curator, the analyzer, and the teacher. You know where to hunt this stuff down, and then you critically look at it. And then, of course, both of your teaching skills is off the charts on that. Again, that's where my paralysis by analysis and just awe of being in the room with you guys comes from. So when did you first learn about Bob?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When we were setting up this particular interview, I found myself thinking back, and I cannot remember a time when I was not aware of ABE or not aware of the work that Keller and Bob and Marion all contributed. And I'm sure there was some point early in my career that I must have first heard about them, but I remember watching things like Patient Like the Chipmunk early in my career. I also remember watching and hearing about the many things that ABE was doing. And so I was always aware of their work. And I cannot remember the first time I came across it, but I know it was very early in my career, particularly at a time when I was suddenly thrust into a leadership position and I did not feel like I had the skills yet to teach training to others. I kept looking for resources, and the ones that kept coming in front of me were Bob and Marion Bailey, Karen Pryor, and they were the sources that I tended to look at the most for good information.
Ken, turn back the clock a long time, Texas, I believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Marion and I introduced ourselves to you after one of your shows there. And what aquarium was it?
It was at Ciarama Marine World of Texas. It was in Galveston Island.
Yeah, okay. And we both looked at your work on the stage. And that's why we really came up and introduced ourselves, because we both saw you as a very confident appearing trainer. Now, I say confident appearing because we all know that it's a show up there, it's showmanship that you convey across to the people in front of you, just how comfortable you are with these animals, and it's all really wonderful. Inside your guts may be all tied up. But the real point is that we saw a very skillful person up on the stage. I had not heard of you before. And so that's why we came up and introduced ourselves. Do you remember that?
I do. I had heard of you. I wasn't really sure. I think I was probably in my young boots at the time, not really being sure why you were talking to me, but I do remember that my early interactions with you were in passing and things such as that. And I remember feeling very appreciative of the fact that you came and introduced yourselves, but I was still learning, was still in the very early stages of my career. I mean, I had been working in that facility for quite some time, but I was still searching for my proper path, and I think meeting the two of you really helped me.
Again, I want to emphasize that you not only spoke confidently, but your handling of the animals was really very good. We were impressed with it.
Well, I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me, so thank you.
That really does. When Bob says that to you, that feels good.
Oh, it does. No question about it.
Well, and we certainly followed your career after that, certainly. And we had great times together, a number of times where we met at various meetings. So
yeah, we always seem to gravitate toward each other. We would be at whether it be an ABMA conference or an IMATA conference or wherever, and I was always happy to see you at those conferences and loved hearing your stories about what adventures you were on at the time, whether it was working with trainers in Europe on some new development, or whether you were asking questions and talking about some new research project that you'd seen and wondered what my opinion was. I always appreciated those times that we could talk about training and talk about the community and the industry. I learned a lot from you, and I appreciated those opportunities to touch base with you actually pretty often throughout my career.
The other neat thing about Ken, I don't know if people really know, is if he has a question or a curiosity, he researches it. He will set it up and, work with it. I think of the times that I've run into you, Ken, at conferences and stuff. And one time you had been working, it was something to do with a pit bull project to see if dogs could be reintroduced into communities. And then another conference, you were hot and heavy into the LRS research and stuff. And I don't think people realize enough what that takes to be curious and yet have that, I don't know what you call it, that it's going to be that yes again. You say yes, and then you go and look into it. You go and pursue it.
But yeah, I only go and pursue those things that I have an interest in, that I think either that I feel like I can contribute to, or that this has been plaguing me. This question keeps coming up. I keep hearing it, and I don't like not having an answer. And one of the things that I really learned from Bob is that so often things that look new, that you think, oh, this has never been done before, or I've never heard of this before. And you can go to someone like Bob and he'll go, well, actually, in 1946, or he'll refer back to something that either Skinner had done or that he and Marion had done research on. And oftentimes, if it wasn't in the public mainstream, newer trainers can overlook it and not know where to find that kind of information. So as I became more aware of the fact that there is relatively little that is brand new in the training community that hasn't been thought about, talked about, or observed before, I now almost regularly go back to early Skinner works or go back to conversations and things that Marion and Bob have published and look for. It may be new to this particular organization. It may be new for this particular species. It may be new in their mind, but I'm willing to bet that somewhere in the past, someone else has already looked into this before. And I dislike recreating the wheel. If someone's created it already, if someone's studied it already and understands it already, then let's go back to that original research. Let's go back to those original pioneers, give them credit for it, and look at what they already have said about this particular topic. So it's just always been an interest of mine to be able to go back to the original source material whenever possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was really Karen and Terry Ryan, the two of them together, who brought Marion and I into the internet, into the old Click L list.
Yes.
And that was a lot of fun. We had not really discovered that much in the way of computer communication and the ability to communicate with people all over. And it was interesting to me that we were introduced literally to the other people, and it was weeks and weeks of our chatting on there, and then finally someone, and her last name was German, okay. And she essentially said, "Who the hell are you?" And Karen and Terry came on for a little while, but Marion and I decided that we would write a little treatise on where we were from, because they had never even heard of Animal Behavior Enterprises.
Right.
And it was interesting. It was a good indoctrination for me about what the future was going to be like. Karen had already discovered it, and Terry also. They were all involved in this new communication on the internet, and I was appreciative of that. It was probably at that time that Karen and I talked the most on the telephone, because there were times where things were being discussed, and I just wonder, how did this get started? Because there were some some really strange ideas about the meaning, the use of, and the significance of the conditioned reinforcer.
Right.
And it was as if it was such a new thing, and we were trying to get across that there was a real technology really based on this and been around for decades. So it was amusing for me, and I would say that Marion and I were kind of amused about this, that people were just discovering this.
Yeah, there's several things I'd love to say about that. First of all, when you talk about those old listservs, I would imagine that modern new trainers aren't even aware of what those are because it was the predecessor to social media. Today we can go on to Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever social media platform is popular at the time, and people use that, and it's a great way of distributing information. But before social media, we had these listservs, and I remember the Click listserv, the Click L listserv, and it was a great source of information. It was the first time I came across a community of trainers outside of visiting a conference and was able to have all these people weighing in on concepts and ideas. And I think when people like yourself and Marion join in, or Karen would join in, you would have information from the past that people hadn't heard before. And I think one of the unique things about the training communities today is while we have access to lots of resources, training styles, training policies, training protocols often develop in a vacuum. They are this group of trainers working with guide dogs, or this group of trainers working with search and rescue dogs, and they don't necessarily go back in history. They just do what works for them, give it a name, and not realize that there's actually some scientific literature that they could go back to that has already been looking into those things. And so I think when you come on to a listserv back then and talked about the conditioned reinforcer, talked about its value, talked about what the science said, that was new information for a lot of us, particularly those of us who did not grow up in the scientific world. I am a trainer that came to the science really late in my career. I became a practical trainer first, learned to train, became a better and better and better trainer. And then because of my exposure to people like yourself, Bob, I became much more aware of the science. And I ended up going back to school and learning about the science, and found myself hitting myself on the head saying, I can't believe this body of knowledge has existed. And I'd been working in the career for like 20 some years before I became aware of the significance of the literature that was already there. And I think your willingness, Bob, to come on to a listserv like that, or to attend a conference of many really young trainers that didn't know who you were, but were still there. You were willing to educate them. You were willing to share stories. You were willing to talk about the science that underpins the career that all of us have chosen. And I think that has always been one of the things I've really admired about your willingness to share, your willingness to talk about the background and remind us where that all came from. And of course, one of the things you just said, I always quote you on saying that, as Bob Bailey says, training is a technology. And I love that statement because it so reflects the skill set and knowledge that you need to be able to be a good trainer. I appreciate that a lot.
So, young trainers, I don't know if you heard what Ken said. I'm still thinking about it. But he said, when he's curious about something, he just defaults to this probably came from somewhere before. Somebody else probably already solved for this. And if I go back through the literature, or, thank goodness we still have Bob as a living, encyclopedia of all that stuff. If he goes back, he figures it out. That's so different than what you can find on the internet and in social media, where you see just the phenomenon of a trainer just putting an acronym to something that already exists. And then it's like you're following a cult of personalities. And the personality may be so attractive to you mentally or whatever that you just follow it and think it's gold. But listen to what Ken said, because that's critical thinking skills. When you say, wow, okay, I am curious about this, let me look back. And I think if we if we all just defaulted to that first, go back and you can write Bob or write me and I'll ask Bob and go back to the science, or Ken, he's a wealth of information as well. You can find that there is science behind it and somebody has already explored it before. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is pretty cool. And one of the things that I think I'm constantly fascinated by, because I think in taking over for Karen's role in her company, I have really become a translator of information. In other words, I'm not a scientist myself. I'm a practitioner, but I want to be able to explain it to people. And frequently when I come across young trainers, there's massive conversations and arguments about what this particular tool is and what it isn't. And it surprises me the differing opinions, differing thought processes about it. And so I often find myself writing articles about these concepts because it's understandable why there is differing opinions about stuff. There are just terms. I often feel like the scientific community made some mistakes in the names they put on things simply because some of those words existed in the English language before behavior analysis gave it a name. So you think about words like timeouts. When people talk about timeouts, are they talking about a conditioned punisher, something in which they remove the opportunity for reinforcement, which is the behavioral definition of a timeout? Or are we talking about a sports timeout that isn't about consequences, but is just about taking a break? And so consequently, what happens is young trainers will have these arguments, and you realize one of them is talking about a sports timeout, and the other one is talking about this negative punisher timeout, and they're not talking about the same thing at all. They're just using the same term. And I always say to people, ultimately, it's good to understand the terminology, and it's good to go back to the original terminology. But in the end, it isn't about who's right or wrong, because that's just an ego thing. It's really about, is what you're doing helping your animal? Is it helping the animal to learn what you want it to learn? And if it's not, who cares what you call it? Let's figure out what it is you need to do to be successful. And then let's learn about what the science says so that we understand these terms that are out there. But there's constant arguments about terminology that just drive me crazy, because it seldom is about helping the animal. It's about figuring out if you're right or if I'm right. And then that shouldn't be where the conversation ends.
Does it contribute to the value of the technology that we're talking about?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happens is when we talk about various concepts, we hear them, like a jackpot, for example, and people start using the term. And then because jackpots exist in casinos and in lottery things, we all have this idea of what we think a jackpot is. And then we all talk about it as if we're talking about the same thing. But I know if I had 4 trainers in this room right now and we all asked each other for a definition of what we mean when we say a jackpot, there might be similarities, but there would be a lot of differences in our application of them, which then of course means that the results of whatever we're doing are going to be very, very different. And so it often requires us to say, before you talk about this concept, whatever it is, can you tell me what you mean by that, how you use it, and how that affects the behavior of the animal that you're working with, so that we at least know that we're talking about the same concept. I remember one of my early recollections of Bob was he came across me at some place, and he was talking about asking a question about something he was hearing at an IMATA conference, and he said, "Where in the world did that word come from? That's not in the literature." And I loved those questions, because it is interesting to historically look in certain communities and see how the guide dog community or the marine mammal community or the police law enforcement community start using a word where they've come up with their own definition for it, or given a totally new name to something that just doesn't exist in the literature. There's actually a word for it already that's already out there. They just weren't aware of it, and they took it and ran with it. And it's become commonplace within that training community to use that word that doesn't really have any scientific reference point.
Are you an animal trainer ready to sharpen your skills to a legendary level? Or a corporate leader looking for a fresh, powerful way to boost team dynamics, decision-making, and leadership? Discover Kirsten's Chicken Workshops, an immersive 5-day experience rooted in the science-based curated exercises of the legendary Bob and Marion Bailey. Train a live chicken using the principles of operant conditioning, like positive reinforcement. Why chickens? They're fast, honest teachers that instantly reveal where you need to improve your training skills. No fluff, just real results that transfer to dogs, horses, or any species you want to train, and even to leading people more effectively. Trainers call it life-changing. Dr. Bob Bailey himself endorses it as the ultimate mechanical skill builder. So visit Kirsten'sChickenWorkshops.com right now and sign up for the waitlist. Spots fill fast. Train a chicken, change the way you train and lead forever. Head to Kirsten'sChickenWorkshops.com today.
I have a question, but it really has to do with investment. Trainers taking the time to invest in themselves. So often I see trainers spending lots of time training the animal, but I can see from the behavior of the trainer that their skill levels, their actual mechanical skills, are really, let's say, not up to what it should be. And I so often want to go over to them and say, why don't you take some time learning how to deliver the reinforcer? About timing, can you really precisely time what you are wanting to reinforce? How are you able, Ken, to convince people to take the time when they're not facing their animal and develop the skills that they really need to have? That goes all the way back to the Brelands way back in the 40s, training with chickens to teach people how to handle themselves. It's like teaching a dancer how to dance.
Right. And it requires a lot of time to do it. And you're absolutely right. A lot of young trainers, particularly in this current era, I see trainers that maybe have taken a course, they take an internship, and they feel like they have everything they need now to succeed, and they really haven't taken the time to develop their mechanical skills. They haven't taken the time to practice. And you asked a really good question, how do I convince them? It's a constant battle. I constantly feel like there's this need to illustrate the importance of continuing education, and it goes beyond just reading the books. The literature is great, but I've always talked about good training is a combination of practical skills and theoretical skills. And oftentimes, if they haven't had the time to actually practice with an animal in front of them, with their delivery of reinforcers, with all the things that they need to do, they may have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have the ability to carry out whatever training skill they want to develop because they haven't practiced enough. And so when I take an opportunity when trainers admire somebody else doing something and say, gosh, that guy's really good, or that trainer's really excellent. How do they get that good? I always say it's about practice. It's about practice, but also having the ability to watch you practice and having someone point out ways of improving what you just did, because people can practice for thousands of hours, but if they are not getting feedback and correcting what they've done wrong, they're just practicing bad skills over and over again, and that's why they don't get any better. And so it's recognizing that you not only do you need to practice, but you also need a way of evaluating, whether you videotape yourself and watch yourself and look for those mistakes you're making, or have someone with more experience and more skills than you watching you and giving you that critical feedback. And I think the thing that's been difficult, it's always difficult for trainers, is being willing to accept feedback and recognize that someone else can often see your mistakes or see your errors or see ways of improving that you just aren't able to see in yourself. And if you're not willing to be open to that critical feedback, you will not progress as a trainer. You have to be open to it. And it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have. I now have been training, can't believe it, but I've been training for over 50 years now. And I still find myself, making mistakes, find myself appreciating when another trainer can watch me and ask me questions and give me feedback. And I think that's a skill that is just an ability that's lost on a lot of people. They feel like once they get to whatever level, a couple of years of experience, they're kind of like, I know how to do it now. And they're not willing to keep accepting more feedback. And I think that is a critical part of what has made all of us that are successful at training more successful, either because we're able to self-evaluate well or we're willing to take feedback from others.
Yes, this idea of taking things personally, I think my training is me. And if you question my training, you're questioning me, your
Right.
professional skills.
Yeah.
Ogden Lindsley had a term, automaticity, and it had to do with the ability to do not just one thing, but many things with a high level of skill. And on my first trip to Animal Behavior Enterprises, when I was running the Navy Dolphin program, that I watched Kent Burgess training 12 chickens in cages and 4 rabbits and a few ducks, and talking to me about the local fishing conditions while he's doing this, all simultaneously.
Right.
And I realized then that I was a babe in the woods. I had no idea of what it was possible to do as a trainer if you're willing to invest in the skill. And Kent Burgess was a fantastic trainer. He was just very high level and could train on many levels. By that, I mean he could train many kinds of animals simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
As he put it, it took him 10 to 15 years until he finally accepted that he would always be learning. He would never be as good as he could be, but he has to keep trying. That was one of his messages to me.
And I love that idea of keep trying. I think that recognition that we are all on a learning journey and we've got to keep working at it, and we can't ever just sit back and rest on our laurels. But you're absolutely right. And the fact that he was able to do all of those things sort of speaks to that idea that you always share with us, that training is a mechanical skill. That's not meant to diminish the skill. It's just meant to say the hours of practice that you go into it. I always equate it when I tell people that Bob Bailey always says training is a mechanical skill, and they take umbrage at that and they said, no, there's more. It's not just mechanical. I said, no, but I think about it like being a really skilled driver. When you're a new driver on the highway, you're busy trying to stay in the right lane and thinking about putting on your brakes and all of these things that are overwhelming your brain. But once you become a good driver, it's not that being aware of when to brake and to stay in the lane is not important, but it becomes second nature to you in such a way that you're able to focus on other things and still be able to brake, still be able to see the traffic. Those are some of the things that much repetition and practice allows you to do, so that once you've been driving for a really, really, really long time, you can handle lots of new things thrown at you because you have become an experienced driver. And that is that mechanical skill that you have developed. And it doesn't negate the time you put into learning to drive. It just actually amplifies it because you're now able to do more things at the same time.
Think of the neurosurgeon that is going to be operating on your head.
Yes.
Do you want somebody who's read every neurosurgery book that's ever been written? Or do you want somebody who's done it with success for the last 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's exactly where I got the idea of the driving example. I didn't feel qualified to talk about neurosurgery, so but I heard you use that example, and I said, well, I'm going to use an example similar to that I can relate to, which is driving. But I absolutely agree with you. It's about the practice and having the opportunity of done it many, 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 many times.
Yeah, well, to me, again, that is investing in yourself.
Right.
And so often I'm afraid the trainer is so focused on the animal that they're working on, and that's what they usually I'm training on or
Yes.
whatever, that they forget that they are the key, actually the key part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for their doing the training, nothing would be happening. So they had better start focusing on themselves at some time. And that's why I like to focus on not your animal, but some other animal somewhere else.
Right.
Before you make the mistake with the animal that you're going to ultimately use, make the mistake somewhere else, and preferably without an animal at all.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I totally agree.
how many beans can you put into a bowl? And I know in training the military, those guys got so unhappy. I was about ready to say a few other things, but they got so unhappy about having to put beans in a bowl. But they had to get the little beans out of a little package and put them in this bowl. And then finally, they had to do it blindfolded or close their eyes. And they would be allowed one or two with their eyes open, and then they would have to do it with their eyes closed. Then we would move the bowl, and they would have to feel for the bowl and then start delivering their. They were not allowed to watch.
Right.
They had to do it by the feeling within their arms, the proprioception that they had. And it was trying to teach another skill. That's
Right.
what it
And I don't think people recognize the value of those skills until they go through them. It can seem like, oh, that seems silly. Why should I have to do that? But when you do get a chance to practice those skills and go through those exercises, you begin to realize what you're missing. You get to realize the things you need to pay more attention to. It makes you a much, much better trainer. I agree completely.
It makes your animal a lot smarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. I think one of the things that happens with young trainers too is someone shares some protocol. Here's the 5 steps to training this behavior. And they look at their piece of paper, read the protocol, and go, okay, I'm going to follow these steps. But when the animal hasn't read the training plan and they go off in their own direction, they often don't have the observational skills or the ability to recognize where it went off plan and what they need to do to adjust it. And so that's again where that practice and that exposure to lots of different scenarios, lots of different animals helps you become better because every animal is unique.
Yes.
I could listen to you talk, both of you talk all day. I can see why you guys talk so much and how productive it is because, following Bob, Ken, you sound like Bob, like you guys think alike, which is amazing to me. Again, young trainers out there, it is a good time to be alive and it is a good time to get into training. Ken's latest role is running the Karen Pryor Clicker Academy. Is that correct? Did I say that correctly, Ken?
Yeah, the Karen's company is called Karen Pryor Clicker Training, and she created an academy for professional dog trainers to learn mechanical skills and information about positive reinforcement training and become certified as a positive reinforcement trainer. And when she turned 80, which was, 15 years ago now, that when she turned 80, she just said to herself, maybe I ought to think about slowing down. Maybe I ought to think about retiring. And that's when she approached me and asked me if I would be interested in taking over her role with the company. And of course, I was with the Shed Aquarium at the time, and that was where I assumed I would retire. I assumed I would finish up my career at the aquarium. But when she asked me to step into her role, it was first very humbling that she would ask me to do that. But I really started thinking about the impact that I could make on a new generation of trainers. And I was really excited to see that dog training was beginning to embrace positive reinforcement training more and more. And I thought I could make an impact here and I would be taking over a legacy that I really admired of Karen's. And so I moved into that position. And I've been doing this now for about 15 years now that I've been in her role.
Which is amazing. So Ken's focus is on the mechanical skills. And if you go to, work with him, of course you learn the terminology and the science and you get the mechanical skills. And If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that's what I'm essentially the passion I have for keeping the chicken workshops out there is Bob and Marion. Again, they had that same focus. Let's get the mechanical skills into people's hands. Let's all be using the same terminology. So if you're a young trainer and you're out there, there's resources. It's a good time to be alive. And I can only encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. So Ken, thank you so much for coming on. Ken, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, if they want to know more about what you're doing, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can certainly go to the Karen Pryor Clicker Training website. That is a great place to see all the different things that we're doing. I teach classes here at my ranch, which we call the Karen Pryor National Training Center. It's an opportunity for you to gain experience working hands-on with animals that aren't your own. It's a chance to learn about training, an opportunity to get that kind of experience. And so clickertraining.com is the great place to go. And from there, you can really find out about all of the different things that that we are doing as an organization and many of the projects that I'm involved in, whether it be conservation projects in Africa or whether it be working with a guide dog organization to improve their training or just working with everyday individual trainers to become better professionals. That's what I'm dedicated to doing, and we have all that information available on the clickertraining.com website.
Great. I cannot thank you both enough for coming on today. This was amazing. I enjoyed it so much. I kept forgetting that I'm supposed to speak up. So until next time, stay curious. Remember, behavior is lawful, and that reinforcement is a process, not an event. Thanks so much for joining us on Precision Animal Training. Before we wrap up, here are a few key takeaways from this rich conversation with Ken Ramirez and Dr. Bob Bailey. First, genuine curiosity matters more than you might think. Ken reminded us to ask the right questions and then actually chase down the answers, going back to the science and the history instead of riding the latest trend or personality. Second, mechanical skills are the foundation. Both Ken and Dr. Bob stressed that real animal training is a technology built on precise timing, repetition, and clear feedback, practiced until it becomes automatic. That's where the magic comes from. Fundamentals so solid you can adapt smoothly to any animal or situation. And perhaps the biggest takeaway of all, invest in yourself. As Dr. Bob Bailey put it so well, the trainer is the key. It's not just about the animal in front of you. It's about developing your own skills, seeking honest feedback, and refusing to get complacent. The best trainers stay humble, stay curious, and keep growing. So until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember that real progress comes from putting in the work, both on yourself and with the animals you love. Thanks for listening to Precision Animal Training. We'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Precision Animal Training Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen. It helps spread the word to more trainers like you. Share the show with a friend who could use a behavior breakthrough. Want to dive deeper into precision animal training? Head to kirstenschickenworkshops.com to learn about the workshops, sign up, or join the waitlist for the next series. That's kirstenschickenworkshops.com, where legendary science-based behavioral technology meets tomorrow's top trainers. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, remember, train a chicken, change the way you train forever. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios.
Bye.